This is the Sigma 35mm f2 DG/DN contemporary lens, and Sigma makes this lens for the Sony E mount and the Leica L mount, and the one I have here is for the Sony E mount because I don't own any Leica because I'm not a plastic surgeon. We're gonna see if this lens is any good, and of course, to determine if something is worth buying, we need a benchmark. So we're going to compare this to Sony's own 35mm f1.8, which is a very popular lens and not much more expensive than the Sigma. The Sony lens here is actually mine, and the Sigma lens was lent to me by B&H, and as always, they did not ask me to make this review. I simply asked for the lens and they kindly provided. So after watching this video, if you decide to get one of these lenses, please check out the B&H links down below. If you make a purchase through the link, you're not only supporting a great business, I also get a small commission from the sale, which helps me continue to provide you great contents like these for free. So with that out of the way, let's get started. Let's take a look at the hardware first. It is quite a unique design, and the size isn't that different from the Sony lens. It is a bit thicker, but also a tiny bit shorter. The Sony lens uses a 55mm filter thread and the Sigma lens uses 58mm. It is about 45 grams heavier than the Sony lens though, at 325 grams, and although that's not a huge difference, on small lenses like these, you can definitely feel it. Just holding them in my hand side by side, the Sigma lens looks and feels like a much more expensive lens, and even the lens hood that comes with it is all metal on the outside and it's extremely rigid, unlike the plastic one on the Sony. The lens comes with Sigma's traditional plastic lens cap, but it also comes with a metal magnetic lens cap. This definitely looks and feels nicer than the plastic one, but with the lens hood attached, it's almost impossible to get it off because there's nothing to grab onto at the front. I guess I'll just stick with the plastic cap for now. On the back, there's also a rubber gasket for additional weather resistance, which you do not get on the Sony. The focus ring is very smooth, but it still has some nice weight to it. My only complaint is that it is quite thin and it sits right behind the big lens hood. And behind it, there's also an aperture ring similar to what we saw on the Sigma 85 1.4 that I reviewed a few months ago. But I was a bit disappointed by the fact that it does not have a lock like on the other lens, and also there is no way to get rid of the clicks on each steps like on the 85 1.4 G Master lens, which would be useful for video. As mainly a still shooter, if we're not trying to please the video shooters anyway, I wish the aperture ring had more resistance or more notchy, if that makes sense, because it is very easy to accidentally change it. For example, a lot of the times I thought I was shooting at f2, I was actually at f2.2 or 2.5, which is not a big deal, but sometimes you might be more off than you want to be. Like many of these lenses with an aperture ring, there's also the A setting, so you can change it with the dial on your camera, which kind of defeats the purpose of having the aperture ring, but at least it looks cool, I guess. It has a nice big autofocus switch on the side, but it does not have the customizable focus hold button like on the Sony lens. The switch itself is plastic, unlike the rest of the lens. The Sigma lens is $640, which is about $110 cheaper than the Sony lens, and normally there are bigger price differences between Sony and third-party lenses, but as I said, the Sigma definitely feels like a much more premium product and also feels much more durable as well. Now let's take a look at some images. The Sigma definitely wins in design and build quality, but obviously it's all for nothing if the images look terrible. The first things that I noticed, the Sigma's images seem a bit warmer while the Sony's images look more green. And the Sigma's focal length seems to be a tiny bit wider than the Sony. The spec sheet also says the Sigma's angle of view is 63.4 degrees and the Sony's is 63 degrees. The distortion doesn't seem too bad, and both lenses have some vignetting at wide open, but they mostly go away by f2.8 or f4. In terms of sharpness, these two lenses are very similar, but wide open, the Sigma seems to be a tiny bit sharper. I guess maybe the sharpness isn't that different, but it has a little more contrast and there's a hint of purple fringing on the Sony's image. After closer inspection, I noticed the Sigma definitely does a better job managing the color fringing. But stepped them down a notch to just 2.8, they become virtually identical. They're both sharpest at around f4 or 5.6, but not by much. One notable difference between the two lenses is the minimum focusing distance. The Sigma's minimum focusing distance is 10.6 inches or 27 centimeters, and the Sony can focus a bit closer at 8.7 inches or 22.1 centimeters. 2 inches may not sound like much, but at close range it actually makes a big difference, and although the Sigma was sharper wide open in the previous test, at this range the Sony actually seems to be sharper. And at closer range, I'm also noticing some pincushion distortion that I didn't see before, but things like this should be pretty easy to correct. Comparing the background blur at wide open, the difference between f1.8 and f2 may be subtle, but I think I do prefer the Sony here. The lines on the cube and the books in the back seem to blend together more smoothly, while they're a bit more distinguishable on the Sigma's image. Here we're going to do some bokeh bulb test. I focused at the closest point to get the bulbs out of focus, and probably because the Sony can focus closer, the balls came out a little bigger here, but don't pay too much attention to that. We're just looking at the overall look and feel here. The Sony has smoother and rounder circles all around the image, and the Sigma looks pretty good in the center, but it has some cut off and squashed lemons in the corners. At 2.8, both images look pretty good, but the Sigma circles are now more evenly shaped. Here's f4, 5.6, and f8. In backlit situations, I think the Sigma handles the flares slightly better than the Sony. It does lose some contrast in the brighter areas, but the lens flares seem a bit less busy compared to Sony. Next up, autofocus. Well, long story short, it works pretty great with no issues. It's fast and accurate, and even in reasonably dark environments, it seems to work perfectly like a native lens. But if I had to pick a winner, the Sony lens seems to be a little bit faster. It almost instantly moves back and forth between the closest and the farthest focusing distance, while the Sigma lens takes a little more time. Also, for manual focusing, I think I prefer the Sony there as well. The bigger focus ring on the Sony is much easier to control, and although they both focus by wire, it takes them much faster and longer turns with the Sigma to get to where I want. It might be good for fine-tuning the focus at closer range, but to move back and forth longer lengths, the Sony felt more predictable. So to summarize, this is another great lens from Sigma that's about 15% cheaper than the Sony, and that's built like a tank and with great image quality as well. For about $100 more with the Sony lens, you get shorter minimum focusing distance, better bokeh, slightly faster autofocus, and in my opinion, better manual focusing. Unless $100 out of $750 is really going to make or break your bank account, this is just going to come down to your personal preference. Otherwise, just go for the cheaper lens because obviously you're getting a lot more for your money. So that's going to be it for me today, and if you guys have any more questions about either the Sigma or the Sony lens, just leave a comment down below and I'll try to get to them all. And if you are interested in purchasing one of these, just check out the links down below. And thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye.